Hey, Vegas. That's right, it's Vegas Pulse. Stories from the back of the house, once again, with me, your host, Ron Garrett. And my guest today is a guy that goes back about 30 years here in Las Vegas, and he's probably worked in 9 out of the 10 showrooms that were available back then with his show, The Fame Game Show, which is also currently featured here on Hey Vegas TV. Hello, Rich Friedland.
Hello, Ron Garrett. Thank you for having me on the show. This is quite an honor and quite a surprise.
Maybe when it's over, you won't say that.
I'm already thinking twice about
Let's
it.
go back a few years.
Sure, let's do it.
You came to Las Vegas in
1997, 1 month before Princess Di was killed.
1997. From where?
From San Francisco Bay Area in general. I was all over the map.
Some of the reason that you are a little bit outlandish, and I'll use that word,
That's all right.
Is because you're a San Francisco crazy guy.
Oh, is that the explanation for it? I thought
That
it was
must be it.
Okay. I thought it had.
Were you a hippie on the corner of
Actually, I was.
Haight-Ashbury?
That's right. They wouldn't allow me on the corner, so I had to sit on the sidebar.
All right, so here you are. You're a hippie crazy guy wearing funny shirts. Actually, I like that shirt a lot. I like purple. And you're in San Francisco. What made you decide to come to Las Vegas in 1997?
Well, my dream as a child was always to come to Las Vegas because Jack Benny performed here. That's all that mattered.
So you
to
were
me.
a Jack Benny fan.
Oh, yeah. I collect everything he's ever done, video, audio, you name it, I've got it. I'm a huge Jack Benny fan. And I always wanted to come to Las Vegas to see Vegas and to someday perform here. I wanted to be on the same stage as Jack Benny. That was my goal.
Did you make that? Did you get on the same stage as Jack
Well,
Benny? I can't tell you what stage Jack Benny was on.
I was going to say the same thing. I don't know what stages he was on, but I do know that I've performed at some of the same casinos that he's performed at, like the Tropicana, the Sahara, Riviera, and so forth. So I've done some of the same rooms or same casinos.
When you first came to Vegas, you came before 1997, I'm
Well,
sure.
yeah. In fact, I had an apartment here that I would come and visit part-time before I moved
What year
here.
was that, 93?
Probably somewhere between 90, maybe 95, 96, in there.
So you came to Vegas direct from San Francisco. Were you set to jet? Were you ready to go with the show? What happened when you went to your first place to try to sell? Was it the Fame Game, or what show was it then?
It was, at the first approach I made to Las Vegas I did a karaoke show for 7 years. In fact, I worked off and on with Miguel Guidos, DJ Miguel, who was actually on my show not long ago. So I knew him from the Bay Area. We both lived there, and we used some of the same girls on our shows and so forth. So that's what I was trying to promote originally, was a game show. Was karaoke. And then I developed into the idea of a game show one day, started building the props and the ideas to do that. And then I had my, at that time, assistant working for me, and I told her, get me booked in Las Vegas. So she was trying to promote the Fame Game, and she kept saying, you're not going to ever get
How did you send her in to see some of these people when you said, get booked in Vegas? You certainly hit a brick wall there a couple of times.
I certainly did. Well, she didn't see anybody in person. She did it all by telephone. Back in those days, that's how you did it. But she told me, you're never going to get booked in Vegas unless you live there. I said, yes, ma'am. I started continuing building the props, and I moved to Las Vegas at that time.
Did you think that if you moved to Vegas and did the karaoke and later on the Fame Game that you'd be a big star? Or were you doing it just to make money?
I was determined to be.
To be what? A big star?
To be a big star. Of course, I never got there, but that's not.
I was going to say, what happened?
Well, what happened was I ran into a lot of brick walls, as you mentioned. It's not as easy to get a gig in Las Vegas as you might think, especially if you're doing something that nobody else does, like a game show, for example. That's very, very difficult to get booked because a lot of the casinos and venues and so forth did not want to take chances with something besides, somebody who just sang or had a band, which I did those things as well, but not as, I was a professional musician for many years.
What's your instrument? What instrument do you play?
Well, at the time I was playing bass guitar and I was doing some vocals.
Isn't bass guitar the easiest one to play? You don't really have to know a lot. I'm going to get killed by all my
no,
friends
you
who are.
might be right.
But isn't it
because
just what, 4 chords?
it
Bing,
only,
bing,
well,
bing.
well, there's no chords, but it has
I mean, it's really
four strings.
the poor man's way to get into a band, is it not?
I guess you could say. Well, I don't want to insult Paul McCartney, who's my idol beyond Jack Benny, but I mean, it only requires 4 strings and no chords, just playing notes. So maybe some people might say it's the easiest instrument to play, but if you play it well, it's not easy at all.
I'm going to take a break right now, and I've got a little story for you about me playing the bass on stage at the Stardust Hotel in the main room with the Jades and Jay Adorable Band, with Donnie Lee Moore was the star of that, who was the producer of American Superstars down at the Stratosphere. We'll be right back with more of Vegas Pulse, stories from the back of the house with Rich Friedland. And we're back. It's Hey Vegas TV, streaming 24/7 on your television set with the Roku. You got on my case about saying Roku, with the Roku app. I know it's about you, but the real story, real quick, is a bass player. I always thought being a bass player was probably the easiest way to go. Okay. But I don't know how to play the bass. I'm not instrumental at all. I wanted to play the trombone and the trumpet. And of course, my mama said, not in my house. So she bought a piano, which I never touched. Okay. So the group was the Jades and Jay Adorables on the Stardust stage that used to rotate. It was Donnie Lee Moore and his band and a couple of dancers. The bass player was there, but I said, let me do the bass. I put on the uniform, the suit that they wore, which didn't fit, and put the bass on. Well, it wasn't hooked up. The piano player, or the electronic piano player, was going to do it with the foot pedals, okay, to make it sound like I'm playing the bass. Now remember, I'm in front of when the stage turned, I'm in front of a full Stardust audience, and I have never been on stage with a bass in my life. And I told everybody I'll get away with it.
Question: was this on the main stage where they did Enter the
Main
Night?
Stage.
Really? Oh my God.
Main stage, main room, main stage, 8:00 show.
Okay.
The stage turns, and there I am in the Jade and Jay Adorable uniform, playing the bass, but the pedal guy's doing it. So my friend Donnie Moore, and we're getting away with it. Okay? Yeah. He's going to put me on the spot. He says, and let's get the bass player out here to do a solo.
Okay.
Well, I what do I know? Do a solo. Okay. I stepped up front, and I started doing it. I got away with it. I got a standing ovation.
Wow.
Went back and continued to fool everybody for the rest of the show. When the show was just about over, Donnie came out, called me out, and we came clean.
Oh, you did?
And the audience was upset. They were upset. They were, and I thought I was going to have a riot.
You were the original Manili Vanilli, right?
Yeah, the original Milli Vanilli. Yeah. So that's my story. I want to go back to yours. What kind of people did you run into when you were out shopping, either your karaoke or your show? You don't look like a star. I don't mean to be, you're very casual. You got the long, I guess you could be a rock star. Okay, well, but you're more in the Jimmy Buffett look to me today. Okay. What kind of resistance did you get? Get out of here, kid. What happened?
Yeah, I got a lot of resistance because, again, as I said before, they didn't want to take chances with a game show. They want what they know is tried and true, which is a lounge act. Show bands were big back then. That's when they were beginning to get phased out. They replaced the lounges in the casinos with slot machines and all that. We all know the story. And so it made it very difficult to get my show booked. But with a lot of persistence and not understanding the word no, I just kept bugging them until I got some gigs.
You still don't understand the word no, by the way. Let me just throw that in there.
Well, you remind me of that continually.
Since we work with you on Hey Vegas TV.
Okay. But the first gig we ever got was the Tropicana, believe it or not. And I couldn't believe I got it. We kept making phone calls.
And this is for the Fame game or for the...
For the Fame game.
Not the karaoke?
Well, the karaoke, I did very little of that in Vegas. So no, it was for the Fame
Okay,
game.
so you're at the Tropicana.
Yeah, there were 7 of us in the show at the time. This is the early version of the show, a whole different cast than the cast that you know about. And so we did the show, and I thought I was a lead singer. So I did Luck Be a Lady Tonight. Oh, it was terrible. I just didn't have any right to
You've
do this.
admitted that you're not a very good singer.
Yeah, well, I don't have much
What
choice.
gave you the cojones to get on stage and try to be a real singer?
Because I fool myself, and I try to fool everybody, and I do very little vocals anymore, especially now that I've got asthma and I'm really hoarse all the time. So I do even less singing than before. My thing today is songwriting. I like to do that. I like to do comedy, but I'm not much of a singer, and I know that.
But you're a pretty good songwriter.
Thank you.
Some of the stuff you've written, I like.
Thank you.
I don't like it when you sing them, but I like what you've written.
I don't like when I sing them either.
And I'm only kidding with you, but that's part of your shtick.
I get it. I get it.
Is that you don't sing very well.
Right.
Tell me the worst thing that happened to you when you were out there trying to get booked and create a show.
I remember getting promises that we were going to get long-term bookings, and the next thing you know, it's nothing. But the worst thing that happened, one of the worst things, was we were performing at a casino downtown, a major casino, and they really wanted us in there. They really liked the idea. And the very first show that we did there, when I plugged in all the Fame game, I have a lot of props and light up and all that. The very first day when I plugged everything in to test it out to get ready for our gig, an hour before the gig or so, all the power and all of my equipment blew up, and we had to do the entire gig with no colors, no lights, no bells, no whistles, no buzzers, nothing.
Was that your premiere performance, the first time out?
That was one of the first ones, yeah.
They had just hired you.
Yes.
You got the gig, and you have no power.
Oh, yeah. But I had my toolbox, and I'm out there trying to solder the wires and
During
fix
the
it.
show?
Well, about an hour and a half before the show, I'm doing this. I'm on the floor, and one of the girls in the show goes, "I couldn't believe seeing you back there soldering wires." She goes, "I was rooting for you the whole way." I go, "Well, it didn't help because it didn't happen, but they still loved us and they had us back." So, and I got everything fixed, of course.
When we come back, I'm going to ask you what's the shortest job you ever had.
Okay.
And why did they can you? I want to know about that. Or maybe what was the longest job you ever had? It may be the same one. We'll be right back here on Hey Vegas TV with Vegas Pulse. Stories from the back of the house. I'm Ron Garrett, and my guest today is a.k.a. Red Harris, Rich Friedland. We'll be right back. Back to Vegas Pulse. I'm Ron Garrett along with Rich Friedland. He's here, and he's telling us about his career in Vegas when he came here and some of the trials and tribulations you had. Rich, what is the shortest gig? You got hired. What happened? Did you get canned? What was the shortest?
Well, okay, the shortest gig I ever had in Las Vegas was when I was doing karaoke. I was off and on. I'd done a little bit of work at the Sahara, and then Ray and his girlfriend at the time, Lee Marquette, who were also in the Fame game, wanted to do karaoke, and they're asking me, "How do you do it?" and stuff. I said, "Well, I'll show you." So they got me a gig at the what was that racing car restaurant they had downstairs at the Sahara, whatever it was, and so they got me a gig to do karaoke there. And I made the karaoke books for everybody to pick songs from. And on the logo, on the book that I made, I had the logo used of the NASCAR. That's what it was. And I got a lecture from the people in charge. "You can't use that logo on your book." And da, da, da. Anyway, that was my first and last karaoke gig I ever did in Las Vegas.
You got fired?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Did they walk you out the door like we used to do to all our executives or entertainers who mess up?
No, they just kicked me.
When I got fired from a casino, security came up
Really?
to where I was. It was a smaller casino. I wasn't a big shot yet.
Okay.
I was still an underling. And they brought a box and emptied out my desk. I didn't have to do it.
Really?
Emptied out my desk, into 2 different boxes and gave me an escort out the front door.
Wow.
You don't let the door hit you in the ass, you know?
Yeah.
Anything
I
like
get
that
that.
happen to you? They ran you out?
Not to that degree. No, I can't say they did.
You mentioned earlier that at one time you weren't always doing shows and entertainment, even though that's in your heart. That's all you really want to
Yeah,
do.
it's true.
You were a card counter. Tell briefly what is that? That's a card shark, isn't it?
Well, not a card shark. Card shark is someone who cheats. What a card counter is somebody who knows the game blackjack, studies it, knows the math, and understands how to beat the game of blackjack. And I did that when I got divorced. I had a ton of bills.
How many wives have you had, Rich?
I've only had one,
Okay.
1.5. I had an annulment. Maybe you can say
After one, you don't want to try again, right? With your
no,
personality.
no. It's not going to work for me to stay. Who would
Tell
want
us more
me,
about the
man?
card counting.
Well, I wanted to be a card counter because I wanted to pay off all the bills when I was divorced. I didn't want to stick my wife with all the bills. So I gave her the house, I gave her all the furniture,
Really?
and she gave me all the bills. And I thought, well, I didn't have much income. I was a professional musician. So you can imagine how badly I did. So I barely got by on that. So I thought, I got to learn how to count cards. I heard about it. I bought a book on it called $1 Million Blackjack. I studied it and studied it and studied it and studied it morning, noon, and night. And I built into my van, I built a TV that opened from the ceiling upside down so I could see it right side up. And I would work on practicing card counting with my Atari 1200 computer at the time. And I did it all the time. And I started going to Reno and Las Vegas and played.
We didn't like card counters
No,
at the casino. When I was running the casinos, that was something that surveillance was looking for. But I always wondered, how can you tell if someone's a card counter? Maybe because they're winning.
Well, that's one way. Of course, people can win when they're lucky too. The easiest way to tell a card counter is if they're betting low consistently, and then all of a sudden, for no apparent reason, they push out 2 stacks of chips. And then he knows something, or he's drunk.
But
or
it's
something.
not cheating.
No, not at all. It's mathematics.
How do you
That's all
count
it
cards?
is.
You have to have a mathematical brain?
Well, it's a plus and minus system. You look at the cards that have been played on the table, and you keep track of the cards that have been played, the plus and minus counts, which I don't want to get into a long thing about it, but you learn how to beat the game. And if you play on multiple decks, it's much harder.
I was going to say, that's why we came up with the shoe.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Which has 3 to 6 decks in it. And that way it tries to stop the card counters.
That's right.
Did that work, or
well,
were you able to overcome it?
I wasn't that great of a card counter even with single deck. I got worse as they added double deck and 4 decks.
That was the
decks.
idea. That's why we put those in
place.
place.
I know. And so what you learn to do as a card counter is you have to divide the number of decks that have been dealt. And that's a separate count than the one you're using, the plus minus count that you're using when you're counting cards. So you have to learn how to pivot your feet underneath the chair. And that would tell you how many decks have been played based on how many hands. Basically, roughly 7 hands per deck are played before they shuffle. Unless they think you're counting, then they shuffle frequently. And so it gets more and more complicated.
So now comes in Shuffle Master, which shuffles the cards automatically for the very reason you just said, to get the shuffling out of the hands of the dealer.
Yes.
And many times the dealer and the card counter are in cahoots.
Well, that's also another point, which I never was involved in anything like that. But I will tell you that when they started adding things like Shuffle Master, that's when I started changing casinos. And then I started getting recognized in casinos. They knew me in so many casinos, they started kicking me out. And then I had to start wearing disguises. And it looked pretty crazy because I'm very fair skinned.
Wait a minute. You started to wear disguises?
Yeah, like I wear a black wig and a black mustache with my fair skin. I look like an idiot.
Today's we'd spot you in a minute with facial
recognition.
recognition.
You would, but back in those days, they didn't have. Now you can spot just by the person's pupil in their eyes. It doesn't matter what you're wearing, they know but they didn't have that sophisticated way of approach of finding card counters back in the day when I was doing it.
Just as another story, you've seen the movie Casino, and they catch the card cheats who have the electronic thing on their leg, and they use a cattle prod. Did you notice that? When they go over and shock him.
Yeah.
That's reality. That's reality. Our upstairs in the catwalks, we had video, but there was card sheets up there that we would hire because they knew what to see.
Yeah.
That happened a lot.
Yeah.
People doing the games, electronics, and
Sure.
all that. Now,
Sure.
you never did that?
Well, the Griffin Detective Agency was after me. I was in their books. They didn't want anything to do with me. And that's the agency that is what all the casinos had in common, whether you were in Reno, Tahoe, Vegas, it didn't, Atlantic City, wherever you were in their books. Again, they didn't have computers maybe, but they had books, and they knew what you looked like, and they shared that information with the other casinos. That's why it got harder and harder and harder for me to play.
You've been in Vegas 30 years. We're going to take a break again, the final break.
Okay.
We're going to come back. We got a couple of minutes.
Sure.
And I want to talk to you about the way Vegas is today and how we're treating our tourists. We'll be right back here on Hey Vegas TV. It's called Vegas Pulse. Stories from the back of the house. I'm Ron Garrett with Rich Friedland. We'll be right back. And we're back for the final segment of Vegas Pulse, Stories from the Back of the House. Vegas now has changed from 30 years ago when you came. I don't like to say negative things about Las Vegas because Vegas has been good to me, for sure. And this wonderful show and the position I have now, I can't complain. But a lot of tourists are complaining. Resort fees, parking fees, service fees, room service fees. A friend of mine stayed at a hotel the other day. Breakfast for one was $100. And there was a $25 charge to have the food served in plates and forks instead of boxes, which was a $10 charge.
Wow.
Do you think this is hurting Vegas?
It's got to be. I mean, I went and saw a show recently. Who did I see? I saw Smokey Robinson. And so I got into the casino early. I thought, this is perfect. I'll get it nice and early, watch my ball game because I bet on sports all the time. And so I sit down there, and the cocktail waitress comes over and says, "Would you like a drink?" And I go, "Yeah, okay." And they also had a food menu, and she brings it over and she goes, "Now you have to realize food is minimum $75 order." I said, "In the sports book to watch a ball game? I mean, what's going on?"
You were in a sports book?
That was in a sports book at the Wynn or Encore, whichever. No, I think it was the Venetian.
The Venetian. $75 minimum.
Minimum. Yeah, exactly. And by the time I got out of there, I spent over $100 just to have it like a snack. It was good food, but it was a snack and a drink. That's all I had. Another time, my band played over at Paris about 2 years ago, and they said, they told us where we can park for free, and no such thing. I had to pay $50 to park my car and walk a mile to set up to bring the equipment in. It was crazy.
The hotels are using the excuse that because of all the sports teams in the stadiums, their parking space is limited, and others who go to those events and not the hotel have been parking in their garage. That's the excuse they're using. They also did away recently at the MGM properties of the concierge. And I always wanted the concierge. They had good information. They tell you what shows were good or bad. And now it's a kiosk.
They don't have concierge anymore?
And most hotels have dropped the concierge, including the MGM properties mostly. Really? 6 of their properties. They canceled it. Or those people out of work.
I mean,
what do you do now?
The Dunes, Stardust, they all had concierge. What's going on?
Everybody had concierge.
I know,
we had concierge on the street. It was called Tickets for Tonight.
Oh, yeah, I remember those.
From 12 locations just a few years ago to 2.
Oh, my God.
So that whole thing is going into a different direction.
Yeah.
However, I still love Las Vegas.
Well, me too.
It's still the greatest town around.
I agree.
To quote a song from my good buddy Tony Sackett.
Ah.
Rich Friedland, a.k.a. Red Harris, thanks for coming on Vegas Pulse, Stories from the Back of the House. You're a delight.
Thank you, Ron.
Also,
so are you. So are you, by the way.
And your show is here on Hey Vegas TV. It's called The Fame Game Show, and you can see it twice a day, every day, or on demand. Thank you, Rich.
Thank you, Ron.
Appreciate you coming to the show.
My pleasure.
That's it for Vegas Pulse Stories from the Back of the House. We'll see you next time.